Hey guys. Here's a Fate Stay Night crossover. This is what if Naruto became a heroic spirit. War. War never changes. It warps you, twists you until you're little more than a shell of your former self. War is ugly. It forces you to choose, to decide who lives, who dies. War is cruel. It takes everything from you. I should know. I already fought in one. I died. Now I've been dragged into another by an unruly girl, as a most unlikely caster. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 1, Rebirth. Why am I here? Why can't I see anything? Why can't I feel my hands or my feet? I can't see anyone. I can't feel anything. I don't hear anyone either. No scent. No sense of touch. I can only think. My mind is all I have. Damn it. I've never been one for overthinking things. No matter how you look at it, I'm screwed, aren't I? How long have I been here? I don't know. I can't remember. Minutes? Hours? Days? Weeks? Months? Years? There's nothing here. Kurama? Are you there? Can you hear me? I'm here. Hello? No. I'm alone. I must be. Even if I wasn't, I'd have no way of hearing them. Is this death? Did I die? Or am I dreaming? No. I must have died. If I'm not dead, then I shouldn't be here. It's the only way any of this mess makes sense. That aside, I'm being awfully calm about this. It doesn't bother me, it doesn't both it bothers me a lot. Alright. Calm down, me. Try to remember what happened. Yes, this is wrong. This can't possibly be right. I won. Didn't I? I won the war. Oh no, my war. Against that thing. Kaguya. I said I would destroy her, and I did. I promised Sasuke. I never go back on my word. It took me years upon years, but I destroyed her. I know I did. I had to. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I'm sorry. There was no other way. With Sasuke gone, we had no effective method of sealing her away. Killing her wasn't enough. No. Nowhere near enough. We had to annihilate her. Down to the last atom. But we couldn't. It was only the three of us back then, in the beginning. Me, Sakura. Kakashi-sensei. Yet still we. No. I remember now. I don't want to remember. Don't make me see their deaths. Stop. Stop. I killed them. They died for my sake. Sacrificed themselves for me. And for what? What good did it do them? I wound up sacrificing myself in the end, for crying out loud. I fought that creature alone for so long, all those years and years, and finally, I found a way. At the cost of my body, I destroyed her and Black Zetsu. Dragged them down to hell with me. She can't reincarnate if there's nothing left of her body or soul. He can't sow discord if he's a pile of ash. Ah, now I understand. I must be in hell. A hero? Me? What kind of hero allows his friends to die? Damn it, if only I had a second chance. A way to start over, redo it all. I'd do anything for that wish. My wish. Many centuries later. Preparations ready? A distant voice reached him suddenly, as though spoken from afar. Time good. By performing the summoning at 2 a.m. when my mana's at its peak, I'll get Saber, even without a catalyst. For the elements silver and iron. For the foundation, stone and the Archduke of Contracts. For the ancestor, my great master, Schweinorg. Close the gates of the cardinal directions. What was this sensation? Come forth from the crown and follow the forked road leading to the kingdom. Fill. Repeat 5 times. But when each is filled, destroy it. The faint series of thoughts that amounted to consciousness slowly turned, regarding this new voice. After what felt like an eternity alone in the dark, it was almost humbling to finally hear someone. Something. Anything at all. But whose voice was this? He didn't recognize it. Nay, it was something of a miracle that he understood it at all. Her? It sounded like a young girl. As if a hand had reached out to him in the dark, so too did he find the vague semblance of hope stir in his soul for the first time in eons. If he was hearing a voice, then perhaps he hadn't failed after all. Set. Eh? Set? Set what? My will creates your body, and your sword creates my destiny. If you heed the Grail's call and obey my will and reason, then answer me. I'm here. Like a warrior struggling through mud, a coherent thought swam to the surface of his mind. Who are you? I hereby swear that I shall be all the good in the world. That I shall defeat all evil in the world. Yes, now he remembered. He'd defeated evil once. Crushed it, at great cost. You seven heavens clad in these three great words of power. Why did he need power? To protect, of course, but also come forth from the circle of binding. Yes, that's right. His name was Guardian of the Scales. With that single command, his world came flooding back. Yes. A triumphant shout ripped through ears he'd long since assumed deaf. I did it! Wait, what are you? Eek? Pain ripped through his senses like a great and cleansing flood, the sudden and unexpected weight of possessing a body again nearly throwing him forward outright. Despite his best attempts to stand on his own power, he stumbled instead, flailing into the smoke, shoulders slamming headlong into an unprepared party. A slightly startled yelp greeted him within the smoke, and his body reacted in response. Years of honed instinct took hold. Seemingly of their own accord, his arms surged forward, calling a staff in his right hand to steady himself while simultaneously seizing his would-be host with the left. With the immediate danger now past, the last of his senses finally reasserted themselves with a vengeance. The acrid stench of singed wood flooded his nose, accompanied by the faint sound of labored breathing below his chest. He became keenly aware of his heart, now hammering in a panic as he struggled to adjust to his new surroundings. A shaft of moonlight lanced through the darkness, illuminating the one he'd crashed into. He blinked, vision returning slowly, eyes adjusting from centuries in the abyss. Then he saw her. Her. A pair of aqua orbs gazed up at him in open disbelief, framed by dark hair the color of midnight, the latter bound in twin ponytails on either side of her visage. Indeed, that pale face held a slight pink flush to it, her mouth working wordlessly, struggling to form words as he gazed down at her. He didn't blame her. He found himself just as lost in this as she was. His memories were a jumble again, flung to the winds by the abruptness of his arrival here, wherever here was. Just where the hell had he wound up? No, putting that aside, he was fairly certain that he shouldn't be crushing her to his chest like this. Wordlessly, he released her. Somehow her flush only deepened when she stepped away. Ah. The girl thanked him meekly, flushing as she stood and adjusted her blouse and skirt. Yes, thank you. Is that I'm saying to him, but this is a total disaster. I screwed up. Again. Despite her feigned gratitude, Rin's first thought was one of dismay. This man was clearly not a saber. Judging by his black staff alone and the many rings it bore, she could only assume he must be a caster class or some variant thereof. Of course, she could have been wrong, even hoped she was, but something in his ragged appearance took her waves of hope and dashed them against the bitter rocks of despair. For all his torn jacket and trousers might suggest otherwise, however, those were the eyes of a warrior. Even now he was assessing her, sizing her up, looking for any sign of weakness. Worse still, he seemed completely and utterly dissatisfied with her. As though she not only failed to meet his standards, but failed as a human being as well. So it's the silent treatment, huh? We'll see about that. Well, she ventured stiffly, who are you supposed to be? Are you my servant? Keen blue eyes snapped toward her, burning with the light of 1,000 suns. Despite herself, Tosaka flinched. But instead of speaking, the young man continued to regard her with that same eerie expression. Taking a measure of her, perhaps? Or was it something else entirely? Was that a ghost of a smile she'd seen just now, lingering on his lips? As though sensing that very thought, he pushed himself against his staff and straightened, standing tall and proud. A spark of arrogance flickered in his eyes, and for a heartbeat she saw all that he was. Confidence. Joy. Sorrow. So many emotions. And in spite of that he stood before her, unbowed. Something in that gaze of his unnerved her. Just what kind of servant was this? A muscle jumped in her jaw. Well? Say something. Are you a saber or not? Perhaps provoked by her demand, the being before her guffawed. Little more than a croak of bleak laughter, it echoed between them, proud and defiant to the last. Yet somehow kind. Gentle. As though he were a mighty oak and she a mere sapling, he seemed to find her anger amusing somehow. He wasn't mocking her. His brief bout of laugh carried with it both joy and sorrow, the cry of a man who'd seen far too much and gone to his rest only to be dragged back to the world again. Rin watched him double over in disbelief, unable to contain himself, and it fanned the flames of her anger ever higher. Why are you Lao? In a flash he stood before her. When did he move? Eyes the color of bloody rubes bored into hers as their foreheads touched. Because it's funny. A rough voice issued forth from his lips, weak from years of disuse, but growing stronger with each passing moment. I was dead, and now, look. I'm not. Thanks for getting me out of that place. I owe you one. Later. His scarred hand patted her cheek, and for a moment Rin glimpsed a strange circular mark glowing upon his hand. It vanished when she turned her discerning gaze upon it, but she sensed it still. There was something there. She knew not what, only that it blazed against her senses like a beacon. Impossible to miss. But the way he'd just spoken to her, did he really not understand how this worked? He was meant to obey her. Obey. Not flounce about like a frivolous fool. Just who did he think he was? Granted, she hadn't expected complete obedience right off the bat, but a little loyalty would be nice. Not, whatever this was. Her mind refused to accept this complete and utter refusal. This was a joke of some sort. A joke, right? It had to be. He was just playing around. Messing with her. Yes, that was it. Instead, to Rin's infinite dismay, her servant paid her absolutely no heed whatsoever. Indeed, he marched right past her, striding toward the exit without so much as a backward glance. She nearly used the command spell right then and there, consequences be damned. Ironically, pride stayed her hand. Flailing, she lashed out, seizing his wrist. Wait. So you're not Saber? A touch of annoyance finally suffused his voice as he turned to face her. Who's that? The name's Naruto. Magus though she was, Tosaka Rin found herself wholly and utterly unprepared for what came next. A low growl snaked its way between them, but it didn't come from the young man's mouth. In an instant, Naruto's cutting gaze softened into something akin to sheepish dismay. Say, you wouldn't happen to have any ramen, would you? To her credit, Rin managed an eloquent, What? Chapter 2, A Leaf in the Wind. Rin was not happy. Nay, to say Tosaka wasn't amused would be an understatement of the grandest order, for what she felt at this moment went far beyond mere annoyance. She was well past the white-hot magma of rage that had once consumed her. Now she found herself locked into glacial fury, cold and exacting. Why? Because she had failed. An intimate, hidden part of her instinctively recoiled at the notion, but it was true. Not only had she failed to summon the saber she had so aspired toward, but she'd also drawn possibly the worst card for this war. Especially given her talents. Of all the classes she could have summoned, of all the myriad possibilities, she'd gotten herself saddled with one of the most troublesome. A caster. She'd summoned a caster, in theory a glass cannon, as her servant. Not a front-line fighter. His talents likely mirrored hers, which meant a direct confrontation with another servant was absolutely out of the question. Nor could she force him to leave short of using all her command seals, nay, she couldn't even afford to rid herself of him for fear of bringing the rest of the war down on her head. In short? Rin was pissed. Worse, she couldn't foist the blame off on anyone else. No, this mishap was hers and hers alone. She had been at fault for failing to realize the clocks were an hour ahead. She had failed to realize her error in judgment. She had summoned this surly servant. She and she alone was at fault here. She knew that. Accepted it. Owned it. She had only herself to blame, and she loathed herself for such a slip. Why did I summon a caster? Even now her shoulders physically shook in an effort to contain herself as she took in the sight before her. Because said caster was currently gorging himself on ramen. That, and draining her wallet. With great slurping sounds Naruto all but inhaled the food set out before him, bowl after bowl of broth vanishing down his gullet in the blink of an eye. Whenever one finished he pounced on the next, devouring it with an almost bestial gusto. Rin was sorely beginning to regret taking him out at all, but going to a convenience store alone with a war on was out of the question. In the end she'd forced him to calm down, and dragged him here to this restaurant. She'd also managed to wring a promise out of him in return. He wasn't to run off while they were outside the manor. And remarkably, he hadn't. Yet. Loath as she was to admit it, the changes of clothes suited Castor. Somewhere in between the time she'd taken him out and now, he'd inexplicably repaired his outfit and procured himself a new cloak as well. Whether he'd stolen it from her father's things unlikely, or simply summoned it himself, she had to admit the color suited him. She simply couldn't understand it. A Hokage's cloak? As in fire shadow? Just what manner of cloak was it meant to be? Thrown over his open jacket, it lent him a strange air of regal charm, if such a thing existed. Almost, but not quite. Rin remembered the brutish side of him she'd seen all too well and refused to believe otherwise until her servant made her. With his hair clean and his face cleansed of grime, he looked downright striking. Now if only her servant would stop making a complete and absolute pig of himself. "Do you have to eat like that?" she hissed quietly, keenly aware of the attention he was drawing from other patrons. "Sorry," came the muffled retort as the blonde dug into his umpteenth bowl. "I'm starving." She'd gathered as much already, but his dismissal rankled her all the same. "I was under the impression that servants didn't need to eat." "Guess I'm an exception to the rule, Rin-chan." "Must you call me that?" "Yes. I must." Arg. From what she'd managed to glean of his past, Naruto was indeed a bona fide heroic spirit. And a rather old one at that. Downright ancient even. The words had come haltingly at first, but with time and copious amounts of food he'd told her his story. By his own account he'd single-handedly slain a goddess and saved the world from complete annihilation at the cost of his own life. A noble sacrifice, to be sure. Rin knew of only a handful of heroes so committed to their cause. Few indeed were those brave souls who willingly marched to the slaughter just to take their enemy down with them. Truly a noteworthy feat to be sure, but his manners left much to be desired. Watching Naruto ravage his meal like a starving mongrel, Tosaka found it hard to believe that this bedraggled vagabond could save anyone, much less himself. There was another Taiani problem. Judging by his utter unfamiliarity with just about everything, this was his first Holy Grail war. Such misfortune! Honestly, it was enough to drive her mad. Almost despairing her cause as lost, she channeled prana to her eyes and risked a glance at his status. Once again she found herself baffled by the enigma known as Uzumaki Naruto. What? His stats, they were absurd. Everything was ranked A or higher. And his mana? What kind of rank was that? She couldn't even read it. There was something else she noticed, as well. A faint red aura seemed to coat his body like a second skin, visible only now that she channeled energy to her eyes. It looked almost alive. The longer she looked, the more certain she became. There was certainly something there. But what? The faint gold and crimson aura seemed harmless enough, yet here her instincts betrayed her. It felt wrong. As though it were aware. No, not it. They. As she looked on, Castor's aura flowed upward, assuming the likeness of 9 independent creatures. They did not look pleased to see her. No, not in the least. Rin suddenly found she couldn't breathe. The very sight of these ancient beasts stole her breath away in a heartbeat, a crushing fist of fear wrapping long icy fingers around her heart and squeezed viciously. All she'd seen, all she knew, all of it paled in the face of this entity. This was death. Chaos. Madness. Destruction incarnate. And it saw her. She stared into the abyss, and the abyss stared back, the sight of it reducing her to a quivering wreck. She felt infinitely small before them, a tiny speck of dirt compared to the vastness of the power towering over her. Still the grew, towering over her. No, this went beyond magic, this was. A flaming eye abruptly burst open, its pupils swiveling towards her. Stop, her mind railed at her. Stop looking, you idiot! She couldn't. Its owner, a looming vulpine creature with red fur, saw her and leaned forward. The creature's mouth split in a toothy grin. What do we have here? It saw her. It saw her? Yeek! Yelping, she severed the connection and leaped out of her seat. Of course, this had the unfortunate side effect of upending the table and sending Naruto's meal flying in absolutely every direction. Rin scarcely noticed the mess she'd inadvertently created. Nor did she care. The sight of that thing rendered her a trembling mess. It took all of her strength just to cling to her sanity, and not be reduced to a gibbering mess by what she'd witnessed. Even now her heart hammered in her ears in frantic clarity, like the drums of a great hunt out for blood. Her blood. In short, rational thought was very much a secondary concern at the moment. Oh dear. Over the hammering of her heart, and her own short breathing, the magus heard her servant sigh. You saw them, didn't you? Them? Just what kind of monster had she summoned? Did he house those things? What are you? Her servant favored her with a sad smile. You already know who I am, Rinchan. Waitress. We're leaving. With a great guffaw, the blonde deposited his unfinished bowl upon the floor on the table and beckoned the waitress in question over to them. When she approached to ask for the check, he waved his hand before her face in a swift horizontal slant. The motion carried with it the faintest touch of his prana, nearly invisible to the naked eye as it settled around its unsuspecting target. A distant, almost glazed expression overtook her features when next he spoke. We do not need to pay, the blonde instructed curtly. For a moment, she looked ready to protest. Then, incredibly, she bobbed her head. You do not need to pay. It's on the house. On the house. The girl parroted numbly. Naruto beamed. Good girl. Now then. Off we go. Then without further preamble, he rounded on Rin. Strong arms wrapped around her quivering frame with infinite care, gently yet firmly lifting her from her seat. Laying her head against his chest. A strong, steady heartbeat resounded in her ears, and despite the trauma she'd only just endured, Rin colored. Why was her holding her like this? Was this the infamous Princess Carrie? Stunned as she was, she sputtered and kicked her legs, but her token resistance which was easily overcome by her servant's grasp. Humming softly to himself, the reborn shinobi sauntered outside. Hey. What are you dash? Shut up and accept my generosity. With that, he gathered his legs beneath them and leaped. This time around, Rin's shriek was entirely of her own volition. What are you doing? Whatever reply her servant gave was swallowed up by the wind. Instinct took over. The Tosaka heiress buried her head in Naruto's chest and threw both her arms around Naruto's neck to hold on for dear life, fearing she might somehow be swept away in the gale. Don't look down, don't look down, don't look, oh dear God above, why did I look? Despite her best efforts to remain otherwise, curiosity almost immediately got the better of Rin, and she found herself risking a glance. What she saw there made her regret that very decision. Instantly. Regret. It. The ground was so far as to be unrecognizable below them, Fuyuki rendered little more than a stained blur. Even now the momentum of Naruto's leap was still carrying them forward with such intensity that it physically stung her eyes to look at it. In the end, she found herself forced to avert her stinging eyes lest she go blind. Somehow, The prospect of not seeing where they were going was even more terrifying. Even then, the vague sensation of slowly falling did little to settle her rattled nerves. Huh! A low rumble reverberated through Naruto's chest into her ears. I didn't mean to jump this far. Looks like I was brought back at my peak. No, more than that. Dark blue eyes settled on her. You've got some explaining to do, Missy. Something in his tone brooked no argument. Fine, fine. I said all right. Can we just land, please? As you wish. As though waiting for that very moment, the air around them lurched, and their controlled fall turned into a meteoric descent. This time, Rin daren't look, if only for fear of seeing the ground rush up to greet them. Her poor heart could only take so much shock in one night. Still, she felt the landing all the same, sensed the earth buckling beneath them as her servant bent his legs and absorbed the force of their crash through his knees. A soft grunt of annoyance informed her that they'd arrived at their destination. This'll do, he declared. Settling neatly into a crouch, her servant deposited her upon a nearby bench. Wait. Bench? Blinking away the tears, Rin realized they'd landed in an abandoned park, thank God, with no passerby to be seen. Rather fitting, all things considered. She would have been hard-pressed to conceal a landing like that. Naruto, for his part, didn't seem to care. That carefree gleam had left his eyes, replaced by tempered steel. If she didn't know better, she'd say her servant was displeased with her. Now, he began, glowering at her intently, I have just one question. Oh, spirits above. He was angry with her, wasn't he? And that would be? Rin posited weakly. Her servant turned his gaze on her. What is the Holy Grail War? So she told him. She told him all she knew. In hushed tones, she explained everything she knew to her erstwhile servant. The Holy Grail War. Its purpose. The servants. Everything. Castor didn't question her. Rather, he merely folded his arms before his chest and listened intently. No questions were asked, no demands levied, no challenges issued. For all his brash and bluster earlier, the blonde proved himself a remarkable listener when he wanted to. It was the wish that captured his attention, however. She could see it in his eyes. Pain. Need. An unutterable longing to correct his past mistake. For redemption. Rin suspected as much. Any heroic spirit would jump at such a chance, and Naruto was certainly no exception. To have their greatest desires granted them was a tempting prize even for a magus. And in the end, Naruto surprised her once again. I guess that makes sense. He began slowly, nodding as she tucked her knees into her chest. It explains why I know so much about this era and why I feel connected to you. So, basically this is a war and there's a wish, meaning I have to kill my enemies to get it. I've been summoned as caster this time around due to my unique skill set. Correct? And his eyes lingered on her hand with frightful intensity. You can only compel me against my will 3 times. How am I doing so far? That's oddly cold coming from you. Is it? Again the gaze of a warrior, masquerading as a fool. I won't be held responsible if you order me to do anything cruel. Her pride prickled at the unspoken jab. Just who do you take me for? A good person, hopefully. The blonde chided her lightly, a stray smile breaking through his stony facade. Who knows? Then again, I'd been wrong before. Just like that, his brief bout of mirth vanished, hidden behind a painful memory. Why? Did he expect her to betray him? For all his talk of war, Castor was entirely too paranoid for his own good. She had no intention of appending her one and only chance to win this war. Perhaps Naruto sensed as much. Perhaps he didn't care. It mattered not. And the other servants? What about them? Again that blank stare, utterly devoid of emotion. The others are strangers to me. Enemies. If they surrender, great. If not, well, I'll try to make their deaths quick. It's the least I can do. Do you have a wish? Rin regretted it immediately. A spark of anger ignited deep inside those azure eyes, burning them red. For a terrible heart-stopping moment she feared he might actually attack at her. But that stubborn Tosaka pride reared its head and she stood rather sat her ground and didn't budge. In the end, it was Naruto who yielded, turning his gaze away with an irritated snort. I screwed up. He relented in the end. If I can go back to the moment where it all went wrong, then maybe. His words trailed away and he said no more of it. Instead, he deflected it back on her. Do you? 1,000 petty thoughts sprang to the forefront of Rin's mind. She could bring father back. Or. No. Ruthlessly she tamped them down. I don't have one. She lied. I just want to get to Akasha. Bless you. No, Castor. You dolt. Akasha is hey? Let me stop you right there. The blonde interjected, poking her nose with a lone finger. Just call me Naruto, alright? This Castor stuff, I don't like it. Eh? Why? Because. Fine. Naruto, then. Now, about your noble phantasm. I won't use them. Them? Servants were seldom known for possessing more than one noble phantasm, but the offhand way in which he dismissed her suggested otherwise. Indeed, noble phantasm were powerful armaments made using the imagination of humans as their core, and weapons or abilities owned by heroic spirits. Said to be the trump card of those superior beings, they were held to be the embodiment of the ultimate mysteries of a hero that symbolizes one's existence through historical facts and anecdotes. They could be, well, anything really. That Naruto outright refused to use his was somewhat troubling. I beg your pardon? I'll only use one. The ninja tilted his head, and for a moment, reality shifted. If you want your enemies to experience hell. In that instant Rin glimpsed another world. She saw 5 stone faces, a mighty village overflowing with warriors innumerable, faces young and old alike. Here, a woman with flaming red hair the color of blood. There, a warrior with mismatching eyes. And others. So many others. They saw her. Some even waved. Yet she felt no fear. By contrast to his bloodthirsty aura, this felt peaceful. As though she were coming home from a long trip abroad. The sight of them stirred a strange longing in her. Never in her life had she needed something so much, and never known until she received it. She wanted to meet them. Unbidden, her right hand stretched out towards them. And reality reasserted itself with a vengeance. Ho? Naruto arched an eyebrow. You actually got a glimpse of it. What was that? A reality marble? Or? Part of my world, yes. The blonde replied with a wistful expression. Well, it used to be. What are you, the devil? Rin. Another crack appeared in the blonde's stony facade as favored her with a small smile. Trust me, the devil's got nothing on. Oh, balls to it. She wasn't expecting him to bend the knee. What are you? If I'm gonna get involved in another war, then we're gonna do this shit right. He groused, rapping his staff against the ground. My name is Uzumaki Naruto of the Hidden Leaf. As your servant, I so swear. His sudden earnest behavior startled Rin. There was almost something childlike about his laughter. Your will is my will. My weapons are your weapons. Your desires mine. I will protect you until my dying breath. You have my word. And I never go back on my word. This promise, my Nindo, shall bind me until the end of this war, or till death do us part. Nindo? A small, ghostly smile adorned his face. Another time, another life. His vacant expression abruptly sharpened. Move! Everything happened all at once. A shadow fell over her in the same instant that a howling gale of air burst from Naruto's palm. The latter carried Rin away on unseen feet, then her servant vanished in an explosion of dirt and blood. Ruptured soil flew in every direction, blasted outward by the sheer force behind the blow. Tumbling backwards against the wind, the Magus scrambled to her feet just in time to witness a second blow rain down where Naruto had been standing. Dismayed, she cried out, fearing Castor had been rendered a bloody pulp by their attacker. Only one thing could have struck so swiftly. Another servant? Ah, a child's voice sighed from within the smoke. You're not Oni-chan. I am not, Naruto answered, a rare thread of anger weaving itself into his words. Really, I'm flattered. Oh, well, she sighed. I suppose you'll do for now. Great. Now get off. Berserker. Rasengan. An explosion of golden light blew the smoke away, punctuated by a furious snarl. A heartbeat later, Naruto flickered back to her side with a breeze. TCH. He's pretty quick. You're bleeding. She realized with a start. Indeed, a thin red line trailed down the blonde's scalp and into his right eye. He didn't look frightened, far from it, his eyes held an almost euphoric gleam to it. Absurd. She knew on some level that certain servants were battle maniacs, but Naruto couldn't possibly be one of them. Could he? Just a flesh wound. Castor muttered, looking past her. Bastard caught me by surprise, that's all. So that's a servant, can't believe he survived that. Only then did Rin behold the master, and their pawn. The latter was a great giant of a man, madness personified. Mismatching eyes of gold and red settling upon them, the great Goliath loomed over all. Teeming with strength, bristling with power, the giant gazed down upon them in silent scorn. She couldn't think of anything else to call him other than large. This was no lancer, certainly not archer, and it couldn't be assassin. Not likely a rider either. Nor caster, for that class was firmly filled by Naruto. The saber class was possible going by the great axe-like weapon he wielded, but no, the feral glint in his gaze told her all she needed to know. Of all the... Allow me to introduce myself. By comparison, the Titan's master was a tiny little thing, a mere slip of girl decked out in purple furs from head to toe. Even now, she bowed to them. A cherubic face framed by white hair, her striking red eyes were both cold and cruel. She could have been a child. Assuming such would have been a mistake. I am Ilias Vale von Einsburn. This is my servant Berserker. Careful, she beamed. He might drive you insane. Berserker. Just what abomination had the Einsburn summoned for this war? Grimacing, she turned to face Caster Naruto, in the vain hope that he thought otherwise. She could see the faint scorch mark where Naruto's technique had impacted against the brute's stomach. Even now it was healing, torn tissues slithering shut to reveal stone-gray flesh once more. What kind of noble phantasm was that? Please tell me you can hurt him. Naruto's expression turned contemplative. Pretty sure I can. How much prana are you willing to give up? Plenty. She shifted ever so slightly, allowing him to take the lead. Just don't kill me. Good to know. But first. The sudden gleam in his eyes sent a cold shiver racing down Rin's spine. Ilya, was it? You should leave. He tapped the ground with his staff for emphasis. I don't like killing kids. I'll only say this once. Walk away. Needless to say, the Einsburn took exception to that remark. Red eyes narrowed to slits. Excuse me? Naruto had no way of knowing he just insulted her. Indeed, how could he? He knew nothing of Ilya. He didn't realize he'd inadvertently mocked both her age and her resolve in one fell swoop. How was he to know any of this? Ilya, meanwhile, was positively livid. How dare he? Who did he think he was? All her strength, all her resolve belittled by this buffoon? She'd show him. She'd show them all. Anyone who dared to mock her would meet a fate worse than death. Complete and utter despair. Infuriated, she flicked two fingers towards them. Berserker, kill the girl first. Berserker required no further prodding. In a single bound, he was upon Rin. His bladed arced back. Swung at her. Too fast. Despite her best efforts, the magus froze. She saw the towering sword swing towards her throat and knew at once she wouldn't be able to stop it in time. No amount of jewels or prana on her part possibly could. This was death. Even as she bolted backwards, she knew she wouldn't make it. The muffled displacement of air signaled Naruto's abrupt departure from her side. He was moving but so slowly, swinging his frail-looking staff forward in a vain attempt to deflect the great cleaver about to take her life. Even then she feared he wouldn't possibly make it. Already she could see the weapon complete its devastating arc. Imagine it tearing through flesh and bone, and oh damn it. Rin! Clang! A terrible shockwave ripped through Tosaka's body, accompanied by a plume of cloying smoke. But there was no pain. Nothing at all, save the hammering of her heart. Instinct sent her skittering back regardless all the same, hands frantically patting herself down. Arms? Check. Legs? Check. Head? Check. Somehow remarkably intact despite what should have been her untimely end, her mind flailed for answers. In the end she had but to look up to realize what had transpired. Naruto. Her servant stood between her and the demigod, his ringed staff raised in stubborn defiance of the enemy's overwhelming strength. Intercepting the blow. Blocking the sword. Protecting her. A low growl trailed between his teeth. I felt that. Not only had the weapon withstood the sword, it appeared to be winning this clash of wills. As she looked on, the blonde two-sided his arm down and to the side, causing Berserker's sword to crash past and trap itself against the soil beneath them. A sandaled foot stomped down, trapping the axe deeply in the dirt. Pinned by the weight of the weapon, the giant tugged furiously in an attempt to extricate its favored weapon. Too late, the beast decided to release its grip and strike out with its limbs, only for its prey to flow nimbly around its fist. Exhaling, Naruto raised his free hand. Placed it upon Berserker's chest. Quietly uttered 2 words. Shinra Tensei. An invisible fist descended from the heavens to bat Berserker away as though he weighed no more than a child, the hand of an angry god come down from on high to smite him in recompense for his temerity. Impossibly, the giant landed a blow of his own, and even as he tumbled away, slamming the edge of his blade into the blonde's side with bone-crushing force. Naruto grunted in surprise but stoically accepted the wound, lunging after the flailing servant before the beast had a chance to recover. Snarling, the blonde bore back in, driving his staff into the giant's muscled chest. A lethal blow by all accounts, yet still it again failed to fell Berserker. What the hell? That's twice, now. Why aren't you dead, man? Ha! Ilya crowed. What a stupid caster. You can't kill him. Naruto exhaled. Oh, and now? It was a long and deep shuddering sigh that racked his entire body from head to toe, such that Rin found herself physically shrinking backward. When next her comrade raised his gaze, there was no trace of the mercy he had shown Ilya mere moments before. What were those eyes? Why were they red? They didn't look human, rather, the cross-shaped pupils resembled that of a beast. Her mind flashed back to the 9 creatures she had seen, and part of her quailed. Yes, a beast fit the bill aptly. An angry, savage creature, who, until moments ago, had done his best to restrain himself. I'm a little angry at the moment, Rin. Stand back. Wait, what are you going to? Slitted eyes narrowed. Turned. Berserker, was it? The blonde's voice emerged as a low snarl. Your master said you were invincible, right? That you can't die, right? Good. Raising a hand, he began channeling chakra to his palm. Slowly, inexorably, a keening shriek arose. You'll be my punching bag. Before she could argue, a column of golden light erupted from her servant. What was this? A noble phantasm? Something else entirely? Whatever it was, it gave the monster pause, his assault stalling as the holy light all but sundered the sky. No, it seemed to envelop the world itself, swallowing up the park. And beyond. Like a great dome reaching out to encompass the entirety of the world, a boundless desire to see everything united in one, singular desire. Blinding in its intensity, even Berserker found himself forced to look away, lest he be blinded. A lone leaf flickered across Rin's face. Wait. She'd seen this. Behold. When next Naruto's voice echoed, it was Legion. Welcome to my world. Not just his voice but countless others, as if. Only then did Rin Tosaka truly see. Naruto spread his arms wide. Welcome to my reality. Chapter 3, Allies and Enemies. Gilgamesh opened his eyes. Ho? He murmured. What's this? Slowly, he turned blood-red eyes to the horizon. Stirred from myriad thoughts by a sudden influx of prana, the king of heroes could not help but take notice from his resting place. Indeed, the night itself seemed to take heat and grow bright as day, the primal brilliance of the light briefly outstripping the sun for the merest of moments before the dark reasserted itself with a vengeance. Then, as swiftly as it had emerged, the flow of prana ceased. As though someone had simply flipped a switch, or the two combatants had simply taken their battle beyond this reality and into another. Not compared to his own powers, of course, but worth noting all the same. It almost felt familiar. Perhaps he'd experienced this phenomenon once before in the past. Nevertheless, his interest was piqued by this occurrence. No doubt the other servants were already quaking in their boots. Perhaps this mongrel might yet prove more entertaining than the rest. The Matu residence. Ryder was going to kill her master. But not by her own hand. No, that way lay madness. Her plan was far more cunning, savage in its complexity. She just needed to wait for the right opportunity to appear. That assassin had been right after all. To think, he'd actually spoken the truth when he'd approached her. The thought almost made her giddy. Vengeance, at last. Finally, that worm would get what he deserved. No, what he deserved was a slow death. A long one. Arduous. Painful. She wanted to gut him, to bleed him, to rend his flesh into ribbons, tear him limb from limb. She wanted to hear him scream and cry and beg for forgiveness. Among other things. Fury was not a new sensation for her, but it still rankled her all the same. Pain. Despair born from helplessness. Delusion. The naive belief that everything would be all right. Indescribable feeling one she remembered all too well from her distant past. Plainly put, Shinji was an idiot. And an abusive one at that. Not to her, of course, she'd never tolerate such thing, but to her old master. Sakura. The poor girl was too kind for her own. Too sweet. Too gentle. Too pure. Too easily taken advantage of. As such a kind soul, she had no interest in fighting the Grail War and thus had foisted her command seals onto her adopted brother at his urging. But if Shinji were to suffer an accident, then the contract would return to Sakura. From there she would be able to do as she willed, without Shinji's interference. Zoken would have to be dealt with by her hand, of course, but perhaps she was getting ahead of herself. If what she sensed taking place was real, Medusa at long last had the answer she'd so feverishly sought out. Be it through an alliance or other means, she swore to herself that she would find a way to save Sakura. Anyone who wielded such power could surely sever the link between her and Shinji. Perhaps then her true master would finally know peace. Somewhere among the rooftops of Fuyuki, Archer acted on instinct. For a man whose life had once been defined by ideals, instinct was one of the few things that remained. Few indeed. He'd cast his pride aside long ago, after all. Instinct was better. Instinct didn't get you killed. Instinct didn't stab you in the back. Presently, those instincts were telling Archer to stay the fuck away from whatever was going on in that park. At first, he'd intended to wait Berserker and cast her out, then finish off whomever triumphed. To the victor went the spoils and what not. Not anymore. Not that it mattered. Not after what he'd seen. And now there was a third one there. He couldn't kill him if one of them killed him. His goal remained much the same, despite the unfortunate circumstances regarding his master. And unless circumstances dictated it, or she outright ordered him otherwise, he was going to do everything in his power to avoid that. Archer knew more than a thing or two about reality marbles, and that was most certainly a reality marble he'd seen Castor utilize down there. One equal to or possibly even above his own unlimited blade works. A warped and twisted reality that defied all concept of sanity or sense, one capable of swallowing up someone like that crazed berserker. Perhaps even defeating him. Oh ho ho! As if waiting for that very moment, his master's grating laugh rang through their link. I didn't think you were one to run away from a fight, Archer. Of all the people who could have summoned him, why did it have to be her? I am when it's suicide, he growled. Your grudge with Tosaka can wait, can it? Fair enough. Remarkably, she relented. Come back to me for now. On my way. Risking one last glance below, he departed. Amiya had no intention of seeing the outcome. So, no, he would not be engaging Castor tonight. No amount of command seals could persuade him otherwise. After all, you'd have to a complete and utter idiot to rush to your death. Lancer sneezed. Achoo! A great shuddering convulsion ripped through his body as the sound echoed through the park, leaving him doubled over in a fit of annoyance. TCH. Late. Of course he was late. He really did have the worst luck. Honestly, it just wasn't fair. If he'd been even a few seconds earlier, he might have seen what all that commotion was about. As things stood now, his arrival merely coincided with a bright flash of light, followed by the complete and utter absence of the prana he'd been tasked with following detected. Damn it, it was enough to drive a man mad. Someone had been throwing massive amounts of it around with reckless abandon. So where the hell had it gone? In the end, Lancer glimpsed two servants and their masters from afar before the light swallowed them up. But a glimpse was just a glimpse, nothing more, nothing less. That wasn't enough to satisfy Bizet, and it certainly didn't satisfy Ku Chulin. Having come all this way in search of a fight, he honestly found himself irritated. Gibalg felt restless in his hand, and the servant twirled it absently as he circled the battle site. Ah, hell! He growled, grinding his boot against the dirt. I really screwed up this time. Here I was looking for a fight, and then this shit happens. No matter how hard he glowered at the scorched crater, no one appeared. Nor did anyone emerge from within its blackened depths. The sight only further stirred his fury. Just where the hell did they go? Was that a noble phantasm or something? Arg! It's no use, Lancer. Bizet's voice echoed through their link, her words tinged with quiet relief. Their battle could be taking place in another realm for all we know. Retreat for now. I want you by my side. Oi, despite himself, Lancer laughed. Where's that coming from? I don't know. I just have a bad feeling about this. Fine, he sighed. I'm on my way. Shing! Whatever else he might have said vanished in a startled grunt as the kunai took him from behind. Shit! An enemy? Where the hell were they hiding? Sheer instinct saved Lancer at the very last moment. Even as the dagger found his back, he twisted aside, ripping the dagger free and preventing it from penetrating anything vital. Gibalg sang in his hands, twirling a vicious crimson arc with its wielder to crash down upon the one who dared to stab him in the back while he was distracted. His spear met empty air. Instead, a long sword flashed across his face, opening the merest of crimson lines along his right cheek before he could spin away. Damn it! Agony raced its way across his side when he twisted to defend against this new weapon. Much to Lancer's chagrin, his movements proved a hair slower than before. Because of it, he nearly perished outright. Too late, he realized that the night blazed a brilliant blue. Not in front of him as he'd expected, no, he'd attacked the wrong position. Behind. Illuminated in the azure glow, a pair of harsh aqua orbs gazed out at him, framed by whiskered cheeks and a matted mop of blonde hand. Orange and black sheathed in white and red, he crouched low to the ground, one hand held aloft. He cradled his attack in hand, that is, the source of the ethereal glow radiated from well within his upturned palm. Lancer squinted at it, even as he turned. Eh? What? It was a ball? Ha! Under any other circumstance he might have laughed at such a sight. The steely gaze of his attacker dissuaded him. Like a tiger ready to pounce on its prey, there was something vicious about that deceptively blank gaze. Feral. Two could play that game. You'll regret sneaking up on me. Rasengan. His attacker replied calmly. Then he vanished. Fast. The ground erupted in a blistering burst of speed, such that Lancer barely had the time to defend. Gibalg descended on the young man with a mournful howl, yet his attacker didn't even deign to accept the blow, much less block it. He simply ducked beneath the wild and slammed the keening sphere of raw energy into Lancer's side. Pain didn't even begin to describe what came next. As though a miniature tornado had manifested deep in his chest, so too did the blast rip Ku Chulin from his feet and fling him away in a twisting spiral. In the end, an unlucky tree saved him. arresting his momentum as his spine smashed against it. More so his ribs than anything else. Lancer? Bizet's voice ripped through his mind in a startled gasp. Jay, just hang on. I'm on my way. Ku Chulin couldn't bring himself to muster a reply. Even if he had, he would have roared at her to stay away. At this rate, he'd have to use his noble phantasm. Righting himself with a groan, the spearman fixed his foe with a dark glower. What the hell was that? It freakin' hurt. The enemy's servant held their tongue. Fine, be that way then. My turn. With a grunt, he kicked forward. This bastard, he's going for my wound right off the bat. They collided in a storm of swords, trading blow after blow with reckless abandon. When Lancer stuck high, the blonde riposted low. A glancing impact knocked him off balance, and the blue-eyed warrior spun a kick into his bad side, staggering him before cutting a vicious gray swathe with his sword. There. Ku Chulin took the blow on his shoulder and shunted it aside with a determined laugh, relishing the startled look in the blonde's eye as he laid him wide open, complete and utter dismay overtaking his features as the warrior of luster barreled through his defense and drove the spear toward his chest. Your heart is mine! Poof! And found himself impaling a cloud of smoke. What the hell? Where'd he go? A flicker of movement was his only warning. Another one? Gibal arced upward and parried the blade that sought his throat, forcing his attacker into a desperate deadlock. Now that his life wasn't in immediate peril, Lancer noticed something about his foe. Beyond the obvious fact that he was clearly facing the same opponent a second time, he had a clear set of skills. Familiar skills. TCH. He grunted. Let me guess, assassin? No. Gold, slanted eyes met his. Not assassin. Caster. Eh? Wait a minute. Hadn't those eyes been blue beforehand? What kind of caster has presence concealment? And a sword? Unorthodox enemies call for unorthodox tactics. Came the robotic reply. I will use my staff now. And he did. With a soft chime of music, a black ringed weapon manifested in his offhand and cracked Lancer across the head, sending black spots swimming before his vision. In that brief instant, his foe could have easily dealt him a mortal wound. Yet he didn't. Instead, he allowed Ku Chulin to recover and leap away to safety. Why? He could have finished him off there. Yet he had not. Misguided mercy? Scorn? Pride? Did he think him so weak that he wasn't worth finishing off? Endless thoughts bounded off the walls of his mind, and none of them were answered. What the hell, caster? He shouted. Where's your enthusiasm? We are copies. The blonde replied, his stoic expression never wavering. The original left us here as guards. Our purpose is to defeat any enemy who attempts to interfere with his battle. Excess emotions are not necessary to complete our mission. As if to punctuate this very statement, it raised its staff and sword, arms crossed in a distinctive X-shaped formation. Prepare yourself. A copy? What kind of mage bullshit is that? Give me the original, damn it! The doppelganger tilted its head to the right. Finally, it displayed a sliver of emotion. A thin, tiny frown appeared. Make me. Red eyes narrowed. If there was one thing Lancer possessed, it was a warrior's pride. He couldn't change that any more than a man could live without oxygen. He would always see a brawl through to the end. He believed in a fair fight to the death, and once battle began, he never disengaged unless forced to. Bizet could have easily compelled him with a command seal. She did not. For better or worse, she allowed him to see the fight to its conclusion. Good girl, that one. She knew what it meant to have pride. This copy had just inadvertently trampled all over Lancer's. Fine. He hissed, taking a stance. Be that way. Let's see how you handle this. Tongues of crimson crept up the shaft of his spear, curling around the length of his arm. For a fleeting instant, he actually considered throwing it no. He knew better than to take a risk like that again. Too much could go wrong. The only way to be certain was to strike him head-on. Reverse casualty or not, he wasn't willing to risk the bastard's insane luck winning out. Even if it was just a doppelganger, It had already proven it could hurt him. Perhaps even kill, given the opportunity. He wasn't willing to provide it with another opening. No. He'd nail that cocky little shit to the ground and then he'd silence him. Oi, Castor! After all you said to me, you're not going to try to dodge this, are you? The tiniest spark ignited in those golden orbs. A hand rose, beckoning. Come. Well said. Gbolg. With a snarl, the Hound of Luster lunged. For any who saw it, the attack could only be called death. There was no escaping it. From the moment it had been declared, Castor's demise was certain. There could be no hope of dodging it, no evasion, for even if there was, the spear itself would reverse cause and effect to strike where its prey was most vulnerable. Your end was certain. Your heart was destined to be pierced from the moment of its conception. There was no defense he knew of that could possibly hold against this attack. It could not stop. Golden eyes bulged. Oh, so that's what it does. To his credit, the copy didn't deign to dodge. He accepted the strike wholeheartedly, grunting as the spear bore through his chest to pierce his heart. A wet crunch answered and the copy gagged, one hand flying to the spear now jutting through his body. He did not cry out. Though doubled over backwards, eyes bulging, gritting his teeth in silent agony, no sound was made. In the same instant, he threw his sword. Like an arrow loose from a bow, the katana shot forward on a silent breeze, streaking past the unerring arc that was Gbolg to shatter armor and pierce his right shoulder. How the hell was that possible? Red-hot fire blazed through his arm, but pain was preferable to dying on the spot. That shot had been meant for his heart. Somehow, his own abysmal luck had saved him. What were the odds? Ha! He grunted, holding his mangled arm. Missed me, bastard! A low, croaking laugh answered him. Why are you laughing? Congratulations. You killed me. I am a clone, after all. Castor rasped, a thin line of blood leaking from his lips. A bit more solid than most, true, but still just a copy. Still, he flashed a red smile at him. Doesn't matter. I have failed in my mission. Even so, is it wrong that I feel some regret? His smile turned quizzical, almost as if he were puzzled by his own act. I couldn't kill you after all. The original will be so disappointed. Still, it was kind of fun, I guess. The offhand remark nearly took Kuchulin aback. Well, damn. Now you're just making me feel shitty about this. Another laugh followed, this one little more than a rasping whisper. Just wait till you see the reality marble. Wait, what? Lancer bristled. See you around. In the end, he needn't have bothered, because Castor chose that moment to go up in smoke. Literally. Flesh and blood vanished in a white haze, leaving nothing behind but the faintest breeze and a puddle of blood. The overwhelming aura of dread vanished, replaced by an eerie calm, and an odd sense of dissatisfaction on Lancer's part. He'd slain the enemy, though it had admittedly been a copy. Yes, he'd taken a few wounds in doing so, but victory was his. That was all that mattered in the end, right? So why did it feel as though he'd been the one to lose this bout? Irk. His body chose that moment to remind of those injuries. With a vengeance. Nope, he decided at last, shaking his head. Fuck it. I'm done for the night. Next time, Castor. Still. A reality marble? That was where the original had gone. He almost pitied whoever was on the receiving end of that. Presently, Iliasville von Einsborn considered herself a good magus. No, strike that, she was an excellent magus. The absolute best. She had trained her entire life for this very moment, spent the last 2 months preparing, enduring hellish suffering towards this sole purpose. To summon Berserker. To compete to win the Holy Grail War. To wreak her ultimate revenge on her so-called brother for stealing Kiritsugu away from her. A brilliant plan, revolutionary in its simplicity. If she perished afterward, then so be it. She had a purpose. A goal. To ask for more would have been foolish. But to die, she didn't relish the thought. In fact, she was quite bitter about it, this frail body of hers, so slow to age yet so quick to fall. She'd never thought that she might actually fail. Berserker was the strongest, capable of overpowering everyone and everything through brute strength alone. And she'd had 2 full months to acclimate to him. By rights, this war should have been hers. Only Saber or Lancer could hope to rival him in strength/speed, and his noble phantasm god hand all but assured he'd overwhelm even them given time. He couldn't be killed the same way twice. You'd have to utterly disintegrate him to destroy him. Few, if any, servants possessed such power. Yes, this war belonged to her. So why was this upstart ruining everything? She'd expected to encounter a Tosaka in the war. That much was a given. In all honesty, she wouldn't be surprised to see the Edelfelds take part this time around. She could see Berserker struggling against one of the warrior classes, against a saber, perhaps. But to a caster of all things? She'd expected a quick and flawless victory when she'd ambushed Rin, not a drawn-out battle that threatened to involve or otherwise attract every servant in the city. Because that was exactly what Naruto had done. He seemed to determine to make Berserker work for every inch and expend as much prana as he possibly could. Already he'd taken 2 lives from her servant on his own without his master's intervention. He'd even taken a hit from him and was still going. What kind of battle continuation was that? She could see him bleeding. Troubling as that was, Ilya refused to admit defeat. So what if he'd lost 2? He still had 10. In any case, none of this made sense. The caster class was supposed to be squishy. A glass cannon. Not someone capable of going toe-to-toe with Hercules. Then, to add insult to injury, Tosaka's servant, who thought she was a child, had the gall to ask her to leave. To think her little more than a mere slip of a girl? The gall. How dare he? Stupid caster! She snarled, frantically trying to conceal her fear behind a veil of anger. You can't kill him. Is that so, little miss? Caster's voice emerged as a low snarl, the blonde's words cutting through her bravado like a hot knife against butter. Berserker. Your master said you were invincible, right? That you can't die, right? Good. Raising a hand, he began channeling chakra to his palm. Slowly, inexorably, a keening shriek arose. You'll be my punching bag. Before she could order Berserker to finish him off, a column of golden light had erupted from the body of Tosaka's servant. What was this? A noble phantasm? A spell? Something else entirely? Whatever it was, it gave Berserker pause, his assault stalling as the holy light all but sundered the sky. No, it seemed to envelop the world itself, swallowing up the park. And beyond. Like a great gold dome reaching out to encompass the entirety of the world, a boundless desire to see everything united in one singular purpose. Blinding in its intensity, even Ilya found herself forced to look away, lest she be blinded. A lone leaf flickered across the homunculus's face. Ilyasvale von Einsburn. When next Naruto's voice echoed, it was Legion, nearly indistinguishable from the rest. No, not only his voice but countless others, as if, oh gods! But he was speaking again, and the thought all but eeled out of her grasp. Too late, she realized what was about to happen. Welcome to my world. Take a good long look, because it's the last thing you'll ever see. Welcome to Konoha. Ilya didn't want to give him the satisfaction of looking, but her body betrayed her. Incredible. The word escaped her before she could think to hold it back. By then it was too late. A grand village stood before her, watched over by 5 faces set in stone. Rather, she stood within the village proper itself. Below their eternal gaze, a veritable army lay in wait. Every rooftop bore a person, nay, sometimes several. So many. They choked the alleyways. They perched upon the walls like vultures, armed with every weapon and death-dealing tool imaginable. They stood guard at the gate. Some wore matching and identical garb. Uniforms, perhaps. Others could have been strangers by the way they held themselves. Old and young, men and women and children alike. More than Ilyasville could ever hope to count. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Regardless, they all held one thing in common. They'd completely surrounded Ilyasville and her servant. Naruto spread his arms wide. Now then, Ilya-chan, welcome to my reality. His reality indeed. He had a freaking reality marble. Behold my comrades, the blonde declared, brandishing his staff like a heavy-handed club. Though they have fallen long ago on the field of battle, they too are heroic spirits, and still live fondly in my heart. Here, they all answer my call in this world. We are one. We are legion. You say your berserker can't die? Well, let's put that to the test, shall we? The two of us will be all he needs. Two? What did he mean by that? Ilyasville found herself taking a reluctant step backward in the face of those overwhelming numbers. Idiot! That's not fair. Not fair. Not fair at all. Castor's grin reminded her of a smirking saint, benevolent, yet ready and willing to drive her head first into the ground. Ninja don't play fair, Ilya. Now. No, don't. Grinning, Naruto hoisted his staff high. Advance. As one, the army turned towards her. There were scores of them, though many shared the same uniform, no two faces were alike. Unbidden, a new voice called out. Hold. At the forefront stood a young man not unlike Naruto, in that he chose to stand ahead of the rest. He favored a strange oriental outfit with a purple cord wrapped tight around his waist. Raven hair framed a face even paler than hers, from which eyes of mismatching violet and onyx shone. Unlike the others, this one seemed to possess more than a sliver of power. He looked well and truly aware of the threat Berserker posed. More than most, in fact. Perhaps that was why he'd chosen to take in a watchful position over the Tosaka girl, covering her as she lay on her knees in disbelief. TCH. Clever of Castor, having someone protect his master like that. Naruto, as she looked on, the stranger turned to face Castor himself. What's the meaning of this? Come on, don't be like that, Sasuke. The blonde laughed, shrugging. I don't really understand this servant business myself, let alone the whole noble phantasm thing. I just know how to use them. Thank the throne for that. I could have used clones, but it just didn't feel right, you know? Still, if everybody's here, they're probably in the same situation as us. A noble phantasm that even he didn't understand? Just what sorcery was this? And Kaguya killed her dead. Naruto's smile took on a mournful shadow. Had to die to do it, though. That's good. Still, was plundering my corpse absolutely necessary? Considering you died and I was forced to fight that crazy woman by myself? The whiskered warrior retorted waspishly. Sorry, not sorry. Besides, it didn't work out. Hell, I didn't get Shinra Tensei until Rin. Warg! Ilya balked as Berserker inexplicably surged forward. What? Berserker! What are you doing? I didn't order you to. Too late, the wind of his passing kicking up a cloud of dirt, and she found her words swallowed up in the gale. Perhaps it was anger on Berserker's part that spurred him to act. Or maybe impatience. It might have been boredom. Mayhaps he'd simply grown weary of being ignored for so long. In this form he was incapable of rational thought unless it was given back to him by his master. As it stood now, the hulking brute that was Hercules possessed only peerless instinct. At this moment, those instincts were screaming at him, telling him he needed to take action before it was too late. Immediately. He saw the army before him, and while he did not feel fear, no, never fear, but he did acknowledge these two as a threat. If the rest were anything like them, then they'd be more than threat to Ilya. They would be her end. Threats to Ilya must not exist. This one, Castor, needed to be eliminated. It was a basic plan, brutal in its simplicity. Kill the master. Without her, the servant perished and was no longer a threat. Unfortunately, there was a fatal flaw with that line of savage thinking. Two pairs of eyes, one amber, the other crimson, rounded on the raging behemoth. Get lost / beat it. Twin fists clad in gold and violet rocked into his chin from below, physically lifting Hercules from his feet. Agony burned the world white for a fleeting instant as he hung there, stunned. Momentarily dumbstruck by the raw power behind double blow, he reeled backward, slamming hard into the ground. The sheer force of the combined punch sent him tumbling across the reality marble, crashing past his master, through the barred gates, and onto the so-called road that lay beyond. Ilya darted after him, painfully aware of her vulnerability. Rin actually gasped. Did you seriously just punch him? Naruto laughed. Pretty much. Oh, here he comes. Arg. Undaunted, Berserker leaped at them again. The being known as Sasuke turned his gaze upon him. TCH, persistent aren't you? Stay down. Inexplicably, the air boiled. Amaterasu. A towering wall of black flame manifested itself before Berserker in mid-leap. Unable to change his trajectory, the servant crashed headlong through it with an agonized scream. God Hand kept him going even as he lost a life, then another, and another still. 3 lives. Gone in an instant. Despite the startling depletion of his accumulated lives, battle continuation spurred him onward. Though his skin blistered and burned beneath the vicious and inextinguishable inferno, Berserker did not falter. Not enough, his mind raged. This wasn't anywhere near enough to keep him down. Howling, he surged forward. Into hell itself. His first realization that he'd erred came in the form of the wind. Oh, ugly! Catch! A terrible keening shriek rose all around him, filling his ears, blotting out all thought. In disbelief he looked down, just in time to see a rotating sphere vaguely shaped like a shuriken rapidly approach him. Pointless! With a grunt he swung his sword down against the encroaching sphere with the intent of smashing it to smithereens. Mistake. Raisin Shuriken. The technique expanded violently the moment his blade made contact with it, ripping the weapon from his hand. Then came true pain. Agony like no other, as 1,000 tiny needles shredded his god hand to sunder the vulnerable flesh beneath. This wasn't something Berserker could fight against. For all his might he was powerless against it. He could only rage. Only scream. Until even that was swallowed up by the wind. Still the attacks came, ripping him apart even as his noble phantasm worked feverishly to restore him. 5 lives. He'd lost 5 lives to that attack alone. He needed to recover, to stand up, to protect. Berserker. Ilya's scream came too late. Kirin! A bolt of lightning descended from on high before he could make it to a knee. No, not lightning. This was something more. Far more. It defied his attempts to stand and scorched him to the bone, cooked his very intestines from the insides out in a blast of pure spite. Like heaven's wrath incarnate come to deliver divine justice upon him. Still, he tried to stand. God Hand was reaching its limits now. His once imposing stock of lives had shrunk to dangerous levels. Another attack of that caliber would end him, as surely as Zeus himself. In that moment, his savage strength finally abandoned him. 1 life. Ilya felt herself tremble at the sight. Berserker, he was struggling. He couldn't get up. In the span of only a few minutes, Berserker's stock had shrunk from 12 to 10, then 1. This reality marble was too much. She needed to retreat. Given a few days she could regenerate his stock of lost lives, but if this continued not only he but she really was going to. It's over. Die. Castor's staff forced itself up beneath her chin even as she tried to turn. When had he, how had he? This time he wasn't alone. Not by any means. A semicircle of warriors surrounded the young mage, trapping her in a cage of weapons and steel, denying her all avenues of escape. There was no mercy to be found in their gaze, no hesitation on their part. No restraint. Each saw her as an enemy. Something to be eliminated. Destroyed. There would be no quarter here, none asked, nor given. Was this what death felt like? No. No, Ilya didn't want to die, not here, not like this. She wanted to live. Only now, in her last moments, did she realize this. Berserker, Mama, Kiritsugu, somebody, anybody. Help me. Save me. Please. I'll do anything. You have a choice, Ilyasville von Einsburn. Castor informed her primly. I suggest you wisely. His words seemed to finally reactivate Rin, who frantically hurried back onto his side. Castor, what are you doing? She argued. Hurry up and finish her off before. I will not! The blonde bellowed at his master. She's just a child, Rin. I'm really not. Ilya wanted to say, but she held her tongue. Why, you can't be serious? She's the enemy. That's her decision to make. Not mine. Ilya dared meet his gaze. A choice. The ninja nodded slowly. You can ally with us, or die here and now. The words seemed to flip a switch somewhere in her mind. A twitch, and the staff beneath her chin sharpened into a point. Now choose. Her response would change the very face of the Holy Grail War. That's it for part 1. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.